Heidi Bivens, Emmy-nominated costume designer of Euphoria. Season 2 was long delayed because of COVID, but you guys did do 2 specials in between, and then Sam Levinson rewrote season 2, basically. So what kind of prep, or like what was the prep here like for you, like during all of this whole ordeal, and what kind of adjustments did you have to make?
Well, we went down for COVID pandemic the Friday before we were supposed to start shooting. So I was in really good shape to start shooting season 2. And then, during the time we were down, Sam wanted to give the audience something, because there would be such a long period between season 1 and then when season 2 would finally come out, which is why he was inspired to write the special episodes, one that he co-wrote with Hunter Schafer. So to gear up for those special episodes, I did have to do some prep, but I was in really good shape because I had spent a good month prepping season 2 right before we went down. And then coming back up, even though the scripts changed a lot, I was able to use a lot of the costumes that I had still planned to use, before we went down. And that was like pleasantly surprising to me because, trends change so fast, and, maybe they didn't change as fast during the pandemic, but I was, I was happy to realize that I felt like they were the ideas I had planned were still felt relevant.
Mm-hmm. I know Sam writes into the scripts like Heidi, do your thing in like the description. So I guess like what is it like to have that level of trust with him where he just believes in you, like, and like he knows that you're gonna come up with something great for these characters and he doesn't need to describe their clothing or anything.
It's huge. I mean, I get like really emo talking about it. I mean, just the trust that I've had from not only Sam and the producers, but the cast as well has been the biggest gift. And it has enabled me to be able to, I think, be my best and, to not second guess myself. And so, yeah, just throughout the whole process, the collaboration has been such a joy. It's really been the best experience I've had so far in costumes.
Mm-hmm. Well, the season 2 designs and clothing, they take on a more like fantastical element. I feel like in season 1 is a lot more like grounded, but yeah, you have a lot more like high-end brands in season 2. So what was your approach?
Well, definitely season 1, I felt like I was kind of method about things where like I needed to believe that each character could afford what they were wearing, like based on, what their socioeconomic background was in the script, or if that wasn't included in the script, what I had sort of come up with. So yeah, season 1, I think I was really careful because I didn't want the audience to call out, details that they thought were unrealistic and pull them out of the story. But then when I saw the reaction of season 1, which was a surprise to me overall, that, the audience was so interested in the clothes in this way where they were, DMing me and messaging me and asking me what every single little detail was. I realized I had an opportunity to push the creative and to just sort of not follow this idea I had first season of having to be so specific about it being realistic. And then I mean, so much of that had to do with the scripts that came in and the style that I knew we were going to be shooting in, which was creating a world that sort of is existing between reality and like a subconscious reality of the characters, flashbacks, memory, fantasy. There's so much woven in, especially like with the later episodes of the season when we get into the play with Lexi. Stuff becomes like really like unclear whether we're in reality or whose reality. So that gave me a huge amount of freedom to be able to, just kind of go with my gut, like whatever I thought was going to be, sometimes just the most interesting on camera, and then other times like leaning into, whatever it was we were trying to say with like whoever's reality we were trying to show. And a lot of times I'd have to ask Sam, like, like whose reality is this? And sometimes it wasn't always clear. And sometimes I think he wanted it to be ambiguous. So.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because even though the outfits are expensive and most teenagers can't afford them, I feel like within the context of the show, they seem like quote unquote realistic, as in like these characters would actually pick these pieces themselves. You just disregard the price, and it kind of follows their like character journey. Like Cassie's, for instance, like she's still like trying to find herself, and then we see her kind of like as you've like previously, like she's like mimicking like Maddie's style throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to this idea that a couple things like that, young people find a way to express themselves often through clothing. I mean, I remember like when I was in high school, like the way that I would be inspired by runway fashion, but not be able to afford it. And then, go out and like, through thrifting, able to put together looks that, sort of resembled what I would see in magazines and on runway. So there's that aspect, and then just also, I think when you're that age, you are often trying to figure out what your style is and who you are and who you want to be, and experimenting. So that also gave me a lot of freedom, just knowing that, it's, season 3, I've heard that maybe it's like a good deal in the future. So, I think there's a real chance that the creative for the costumes will change a lot. It might not be as sort of dreamy and eccentric. So we'll see. But it was just this rare opportunity, to dress these like really young, supposed to be young people, in high school and during this time in their lives where they were taking chances.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Well, you submitted the premiere episode, which takes place at the New Year's Eve party, but it opens with like this flashback with Fezgo and his grandma, and I love her blue suit.
Yeah, I mean that was so much fun. That was something that was written into the original scripts before we went down, so that I did have a lot of time to think about what I wanted that to be. I mean, it was originally written into the script that she would be wearing like a rhinestone nudie suit. So I think, I'm always taking into account what is popular in fashion at the time. And like when we were getting ready to shoot that, that style of suit was everywhere, like Diplo and Post Malone and like all these recording artists were wearing that style suit. So to me, it didn't feel very like original and fresh. So I just, tried to come up with a way to do something similar, because I always want to try to be true to what Sam's vision is, but knowing that he gives me the license to sort of veer off and go on some tangent that isn't exactly what's in the script.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I like that, like the floral like prints on it was also blue. It wasn't like a different color as well, and it's still pop. Yeah.
And then I use metallic thread embellishment. But yeah, like having it be like sort of toned down from using rhinestones, or but still a bold color, and then with the metallic thread. And yeah, it's always a fun to find a way to like turn stuff on its head a little bit. Just I think that's part of my main process is finding inspiration from as many different places as I can, so that then when they all like kind of filter through to the idea that I end up going with, that hopefully it like is coming from enough references that it doesn't feel too derivative of one thing, and that it feels hopefully like fresh.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Heidi, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and can't wait to see season 3 whenever it arrives.
Yeah. 2023. Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice talking with you, Joyce.
Sharon Long, Emmy nominee for The Great. You took over as costume designer for season 2. So where do you begin when you join an ongoing show like The Great that already has like such an established look and a very specific look as well?
Well, I didn't sort of do a complete clean sweep to start with. I looked at the way that the characters had started off and the kind of growth, and then hopefully followed it on from the designer who went there before me, because she did a great job.
How familiar were you with, I guess, Russian history? Russia?
Not as familiar as I am now. But I did do a lot of research. I kind of plunged myself into it, but you know, at the time when I was approached about the job, I didn't know that much about it.
Mm-hmm. So in your research, was there anything that like just you know, you clocked, or you were like, oh, like that's like a good idea that I could incorporate into season 2, like something that just stood out?
I think probably textiles more than anything else. The range of textiles, because the Russian Empire was so huge, so the influences came from far and wide, and I think that it was quite important to incorporate that in the look of the film. There was also, I mean, there's a coronation gown which was written as a traditional Russian sarafan, so that was a kind of whole development process, and a lot of research went into that to look at what was traditional Russian clothing at the time, and before the French courts kind of their style took over the courts of Russia.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that coronation gown is really elaborate. It's like gold metallic, like, and she also has that really huge crown. So how long did all that take in real life to make?
Not as long as it should have done, because we're working on, you know, because it's television, the time's kind of a little bit truncated, but it went back and forwards, sort of the design process probably went backwards and forwards for about sort of 6 weeks. The research was longer, but we were in full lockdown, so it was slower than it should have been. Making there was 2 crowns actually. There was the headdress that came in, and then there was the Imperial Russian crown. So there was 2 sort of different kind of groups of people to talk to about designing those, and jewelers to speak to.
Well, season 2 covers Catherine's pregnancy, and she's basically for the whole season. So what are the challenges of 4-month pregnancy throughout the season? And then kind of, I guess you would have to loosen the corset. Yeah. I don't know what goes into all that.
Well, what we did was we started off with a pregnancy corset. So we decided to do her realistically. So women at the time would have carried on wearing the corset, and there's sort of a lace-sided corset so that you can extend them as the woman gets more and more pregnant. But because Elle's pregnancy wasn't real, it meant that she was wearing a kind of prosthetic bump, and the only problem was that the corset was making it move around. So we ended up reversing and putting we had a corset that would work on top of a pregnant bump, but for the costumes it worked better if we put the corset onto the actress, then the bump on top, so that she was supported at the back and had the right framework, but the bump didn't move around, because it was just sort of slipping during the day and causing us, you know, a few problems really. And we got bigger and bigger bumps and bigger corsets until about the 9-month stage, where we kind of left the corset behind a bit.
Yeah, that sounds very complicated, and maybe not the most comfortable for her.
I don't know. I mean, I have to say, Elle's never complained about the corset. I think she's got really
a pro.
Yeah.
Well, she goes into labor in the 8th episode, which was your submission, 5 days, and that one she's wearing a lot more like nightgowns, a lot of I guess traditional maternity wear, I guess you could say, in softer fabrics, and I mean,
a lot of them are based on it's something called a robe de volante. So it's a sort of a kind of dress that women would wear around the house, sort of informal really. because, you know, I'm sure you can imagine wearing a corset and a very sort of huge panniers and quite complicated sort of structural dresses all day would have been a bit too much. So sometimes there was a more relaxed, you know, opportunity to wear something. So we used that really. So we just developed what was already in existence in history to make it.
I love the contrast in that episode, because that's one of the episodes that her mom, played by Gillian Anderson, is in.
Yes.
And she is the one wearing like the humongous gowns, the large skirts, and she's kind of like taking over the joint. So what went into her designs, because she's also like an interloper coming in, and she's kind of like sneering, like sticking up her nose at all of this going on.
Well, I mean, the kind of idea is that she kind of, you know, takes up too much room in the court, and Gillian, in actual fact, is very petite, so she's not a sort of looming person. So to give her that kind of presence in the court, we used sort of size and colour really. So her panniers go out quite angularly at the sides, and she's kind of takes quite a lot. I mean, she has to move through doors sideways and things like that. She's making an impact really. And it's at the time when Catherine is feeling quite sort of vulnerable because of her pregnancy, and also excited to see this mum, and you're expecting something different, to kind of something warm and friendly to come out of the carriage when she arrives, and it's not what you get at all, which is telling, I think.
It's kind of like how you want to like impress your parents.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you don't get the reaction you want, and she's kind of, it's kind of like she's about to give birth, but she's kind of like infantilized again in the presence of her mom.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the idea, that it was that kind of, that feeling that you get, that most people get when they go home to their parents, is that they become a child again. So it doesn't matter how important Catherine is, she's still a child in her mother's eyes.
I gotta ask about the baby shower.
You can do no right.
Yeah.
Right.
The baby shower outfits were just outrageous. A lot of pastels and pink, just baby blues and yellows going on, and Peter's outfit was also crazy. So what was your approach to that scene?
I approached it with the other heads of department. We had it was, lockdown kind of can get quite, I think we were all kind of straining at the leash to do something fun and exciting, because nobody was going out or doing anything, and it was a kind of an opportunity really to kind of you know, have some fun. So we're all, it was quite exciting as a department, because everybody was making things. It wasn't just, you know, we were designing and handing to the workroom. Everybody was making bits and pieces for it. It wasn't supposed to be an expensive part of the show. It was just this party, and it kind of developed into something else, because we talked all the time and got excited about each other's ideas, and found fabrics that were very economical, and then made them into these kind of mad dresses. And Lou was sort of building up huge wigs, and it was actually, happily, it was kind of towards the back end of that block, so it was bubbling under the whole way through the block until they got on set, and it was actually, it was quite fun, because it's the first time anybody had a dance for a long time.
Oh right, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, it looked like an amazing party, and I wish I was there for it. But Sharon, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you back in a little bit. Donna Zakowska, Emmy-winning costume designer of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Season 4 takes place in the 60s. So what has it been like to be part of a period show like Maisel from the start, and be able to move through time with it into a new decade now?
Well, I think, you know, we haven't moved that quickly. We've moved from 1957 to 61-ish, although the new season, which I can't talk about, will really push it a bit. I think what's great about it is that, you know, really developing these characters, you know, and just sort of portraying the various phases, you know, in their life, and doing it through the costumes. You know, it's sort of a very lucky thing to be able to do that. You don't usually have that. And so it's been very sort of enjoyable doing that, and has really been subtle the way we've developed, and really very controlled, which is also sort of great, that it's been little steps versus just big, big steps.
Right. And I would say like that's the case like in real life too, in
Mm.
fashion like transitioning from the 50s to 60s. So I guess what would you say are like the key differences between 50s fashion and 60s fashion, and how did you work that into season 4?
Well, I think, I think the silhouette changes. I think the biggest change is really 63, which we don't quite hit, which is where you have sort of Pierre Cardin, and I always talk about the space age type of look. But I think the silhouette really changes. I mean, I think the 50s is very much about curving and round. It's the, opposite of the 40s. And then you get into these early 60s and everything becomes a little bit more square, a little bit shorter. It's sort of like things tend to shrink a bit, but then pattern becomes like a much more of an element, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed now that I think about it, like this season, the skirts are a lot more tapered,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, well, when you begin with the 40s and that sort of A line, and then the 50s really blows out, and then the 60s, begins to become closer to the body, and it's a very different type of tailoring. I think the 50s tailoring, it's so influenced by Dior and Balenciaga and all of these great designers of the 50s. And I think that there is the beginning of a sort of casualness in the 60s that then, as you start getting into the late 60s, really sort of blossoms.
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone knows the late 60s fashion style. Yeah.
Mod, we're not really, we never really did that, although there's small things like, the way I've changed the hats, like using the bucket hats and the different shapes of the hats. Like those are the elements that I've used to sort of create a very subtle sort of transition. I mean, I think what we've really been dealing with is a transitional period. And I think that's always like very interesting when you see like the remnants of what has come before and where you're moving. And a lot of times people don't deal with the transition. You're either in the 50s or the 60s. So I really embraced being in a transition and sort of bringing things in a subtle way, but yet changing the silhouette, feeling the movement forward, but not like abruptly, really, not doing anything too abrupt.
Right, for sure. And it's still like for the characters, like for Midge, it's a transitional period for her career as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she should be taking these steps that maybe she's not taking yet. But like pink has always been her color.
Right.
So how did you go about evolving that through this season, and through her clothing? And she also wears like some green, which I know you've said is like her heroic color as well.
Right, exactly. Well, I think, I think you never abandon the character. The character is something that you have from the beginning, and as you go through a series, that character develops, and you sort of cling to certain things that, as I always talk about, are echoes. Like the certain colors are echoes of the character, echoes of their sort of mental landscapes. And so pink definitely still appears, but in a much more subtle way. And when it appears, that I'm sort of referring back to something that is a more traditional image of Midge of herself. I mean, throughout the series, I've really played a lot with color, and the color has been sort of inspired by, first of all, the research in 50s fashion, which is like there's spectacular use of color when you look at magazines, from about 55 to 60. And so I have sort of tried to continue, which was something which I found like incredibly dynamic when I sort of discovered it. And, it's really become the vocabulary, and things like pink, green, or whatever. It's the vocabulary for me of this entire series, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, your episode submission was the 6th episode, and so Midge, her usual like stage look is black, but you've been kind of like updating that look a little bit. Like it's still mostly black, but like in that episode, she's in one scene, she has like a sort of like a crop jacket top, and then at the end, like during like seconds count, it's like a black dress with this like double pink and orange bow belt. So can you talk about like updating her stage look?
Well, I sort of found lots of ways. I mean, in a way, you want to start introducing color,
Mhm.
but black still becomes a little characteristic color of her performance.
Right.
So I dealt a lot with a lot of different accessories, like, in terms of maybe the trims or the two pink, sort of sashes, which had a very Obi-like, concept for me, the pinks together. So that's what we're talking about. You're seeing the pink, you're
Right.
seeing that what that means for the character, but then finding this sort of new way of introducing it, and also, just sort of expanding her performance look. I mean, I don't know how many black dresses I've designed, maybe 50 or I don't know, something like that. So you sort of have to find a way to sort of go beyond what you've done before. And the accessories became like a big part of it for me.
Right. Yeah. And it shows like she's also kind of like experimenting and it's like slightly changing. It's not too
Mm,
drastic. Yeah.
mm,
Well, that episode, Jane Lynch, she also wears this incredibly gorgeous black and white checkered coat.
mm.
Uh, how did that come about?
Well, again, everything that I do really comes from research, and then the expansion of the research, into the palette that I want to introduce, and then, how I want to sort of transform the shapes. I mean, I did find a piece of research that, was somewhat reminiscent of that, but then I felt with Jane is so able to carry like bold patterns, bold shapes. There's always been something a little bit sort of practically, Asian to a degree and exotic in other ways about her clothing, like using things that are obi-like or using things that have a kimono-esque quality to it. And she is a theatrical personality, and she's theatrical in Mrs. Maisel. So that was sort of the theatrical, everything I've done for her has always had that edge to it. She really is the diva off stage, the performer off stage, and as a person she can really handle very bold patterns, very bold shapes. And so I really embraced it when I was designing Jane's, and the use of the turban
Mhm.
and all of those things just made her a little bit bigger than life in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Because especially like opposite Midge, like it feels like she's towering over her.
Mhm.
And the coat is obviously like bigger than like the dress or like the coat that Midge is wearing as well,
Well,
too.
she is physically
Yes.
but I think it's also more of a sort of theatrical energy,
Mhm.
that is a part of that character. And Midge, Midge is a much more, she is theatrical, but it's a much more contained energy in a way. I mean, they're very different physical types completely, actually.
Lastly, what can you say about season 5, the fifth and final season?
Well, basically nothing, but I think that, of course, it is our last season. We're a little sad about it. But I think, we're finding, different ways of sort of tying up the characters. And I think that season 5 actually has a few very theatrical, exciting elements in it, which again, I can't reveal. But we did a few things that we've never really done before, like staging some theatrical, productions in the middle of it. But I think what, season 5 is a little bit about looking back, the characters sort of being who they are, but then in small ways, trying to get the momentum forward. So there is, the only thing I will say, there is a little bit of a back and forth in terms of time, and much more than you've like ever seen before, actually.
Interesting. Well, can't wait to see it. Donna, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your
Okay,
time, and we'll see you back in a little bit.
okay, great.
Thank you. Zaldy, you're a 3-time Emmy-winning costume designer of RuPaul's Drag Race, and you and RuPaul go back 30 years, I believe. So what has that relationship been like for these past 3 decades?
I mean, very special. I mean, a relationship that long is really, it's just, like you become family, and those that family instinct was there from the beginning. And it's amazing that all this time later, it's like we still have those same emotions, those same like interests, and same inspirations that just keep us moving forward.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are Ru's like favorite looks or things in like the costumes? Like you don't even have to ask about them; you just know to do it.
I mean, Ru has such great trust in what I do for her, and we always talk that our relationship is really quite telepathic and psychic, because, you know, we both sort of like created the archetype of this RuPaul supermodel of the world like 30 years ago when we did the album cover for Supermodel of the World. And, you know, we made all those decisions like, you know, she has to be blonde and she has to be, you know, like this is what the look is, you know? And really like the trust that that we have, this like deep trust in what we want to do each season. Ru is always very up for it, you know, like sometimes it's like when I bring something, she'll be like very surprised and be like, oh my God, and like so excited to wear it, but it's never like, it's never been something that she doesn't understand, you know, because it's like we're kind of just like, it's like creating and building on this character that we love and you know, have loved for decades.
Mm-hmm. What have you disagreed on the most? Has there been like one thing or like one look that you were just not on the same page on? No, never.
No, we've never had a disagreement, I think, ever in in our life, you know. I think we're just always still, I mean, which is amazing to be so excited after like 15 years, you know, of doing the same show, but then also adding all the other franchises, you know, like the, you know, we do like 6 different shows a year. So, you know, it's kind of more like a season of like 70 or 80 episodes to me because it's still RuPaul's Drag Race, whether it's in Sydney or it's in the UK or here. So nothing is ever like, oh my God, how could you ever think I would ever wear this? It's like we're just so in sync and aligned that it's really more like a surprise at like, oh my God, I can't wait to wear this, you know, thing that doesn't define my waist, you know, something that pushes her a little bit further into fashion.
So what is your process like when you start a new season of, let's like the mothership, like season 14? Do you design an entire wardrobe for the whole season and let Ru pick and choose for the episode that she wants, or do you do specific outfits like episode to episode?
I mean, in the beginning, like I said, like we used to like really get into the idea of like, oh, this is what the challenge is tonight.
Right,
You
like
know,
the
like
theme,
even
yeah.
though like RuPaul is the host and she's not a contestant, I'm like, wouldn't it be fun to like they're doing an ugly dress competition, you know? I'm like, I want to do that competition, you know? And those days were fun, but it's like we just have so many shows that we do. It doesn't really work out that way anymore. And so it is kind of like designing more of a wardrobe and like me anticipating like the different things that Ru might want this season within her wardrobe, you know, something flowy, something classic and glamour goddess, you know, where it's just the tiny waist and the long slim skirt, you know, or it's like a flowy, breezy, all leg thing, or it's short, micro, you know, it's you kind of have to like again intuit like what Ru's mood is, you know. I mean, it is, I could like suggest and place something within each episode, you know, but as we all know, Ru is the final judge of everything in that Runiverse of hers. So, you know, but like I said, it's like, she can, you know, because she is RuPaul, she stands apart from anything, including the theme. So the theme is just, what are we feeling this season? Where do we want to move RuPaul?
Mm-hmm. Well, you submitted the season 14 premiere, and in that one, she's wearing this. She also performs in this like short black dress with like one feathered sleeve. And I've noticed in recent seasons, you've shown off her legs more because it used to be like fuller length gowns.
Yes.
So, yeah. So what went into this like this design and also showing off the legs now, the gams?
Well, showing off the legs, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, like starting with Ru, it was all about the legs. You know, I used to make bathing suits were the outfit, you know, that we used to favor the most. And then somehow, like when we started filming Drag Race, Ru wasn't feeling like showing legs for some reason. I don't know why, but it just was one of those things. So it went on for like, I don't even know, 7 seasons of like, not hiding these legs, but you know, like we would try and showcase them in like the tightest things possible. But one day she just pulled out this dress that I designed for our 90s VH1 show, which was maybe the shortest dress I've ever made Ru in our whole time. And it just kind of was like a gasp, you know, and it's like, it was a very, you know, like what I have learned with Ru, it's just like, one small change is like has a seismic effect on the universe of RuPaul and Drag Race, and it kind of just signaled that, you know, Ru was now ready to like, we're ready to play more.
Right. Well, so like I said, like she performs in that one. So does she give you a heads up if she's going to perform or not? Like, and then is that like something you have to take into consideration when you're designing?
It's
Like,
funny.
oh, this is a good performance outfit, and this
Yeah,
one is not.
we had something else, you know, for that, because I wasn't
Yeah.
really aware of the performance. I think it was a later addition, and then once I was like, oh my God, you can't wear that dress, you know, and like we sort of like pulled together this other dress that I thought would be a lot better as the opener and more fun to like perform in. You know, it sort of had these, again, it's like black isn't exactly the thing that we think for Ru. We think all things color, but you know, black is just such a stark contrast to the rest of the world that I just sort of wanted her to sort of like shine in black. But it was a fun thing that you know, that I've been doing, which has been sort of like has all these ostrich feathers on it, and then you know, we've been extending and lengthening ostrich feathers so that they trailed on the ground. It's just like a beautiful sort of classic look that I felt was gonna be the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned before, like it showing off her legs. Now you feel like you have I guess like a more sense of like playfulness. You could like take more risks, I guess, for lack of a better
Yes.
word. So I guess now, you know, we're like 15 seasons deep and there's multiple spinoffs.
Yeah.
How do you, I guess, like, do you think about like, oh, I have to like outdo myself like every season or like every spinoff of like what I come up with?
Well, there's always that element to it, you know, because I come from the world of fashion. You know, I was a fashion designer before a costume designer, and you're always thinking of how do you continue what you've built, but then how do you also excite yourself and excite all your viewers at the same time? And I think that's something that's very interesting about Ru. It's like, you know, we don't go so off brand for Ru, you know, that, you know, she's wearing pink wigs, you know, to match her pink heel. You know, it's like, it's not that, but I will say that it's like in the coming seasons that we already filmed, you know, this whole year, there's a lot more adventurousness and playfulness, and I think that that came across sort of when we started to do the other countries, like the UK. You know, I definitely wanted UK to have its own vibe and feeling, you know, and to be, I guess, a little bit more youthful and energetic and playful in a way, and risky, and I think it's sort of like seeped in through all the franchises now.
So what's the most RuPaul shows you've worked on simultaneously, and how many are you working on right now?
I'm working on 6 shows, so it's like we basically, when I look at it, it's like I kind of have August is the only month where I'm not making clothes for Ru in the studio.
So this is your vacation month right now.
This is like, yeah, I'm actually on vacation. I completely forgot about this, and I'm like, oh my God, I have t-shirts with me. But yeah, so it's like it becomes sort of like a year-round project, you know, much the way like a fashion collection would be as well. Like you're thinking about it all year round and drops throughout the months.
Well, we can't wait to see them all. Zaldy, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back in a little bit.
All right.
Christine Bieselin Clark, Emmy nominee for your costumes on Star Trek Picard. Season 2 takes place in an alternate timeline. So when did you find that out? Because I know you guys were working pre-lockdown as well. And how did that affect your approach to season 2?
Yes, we did know very, very early on that we were going into an alt timeline. So I did have time to prepare and think about that. We started our prep period before we shut down. So we were in an early part of prep where we were conceptualizing, you know, with the other department heads and our producers and showrunners and director. Then we shut down. We all went to work from home for a bit. So we did this all day, every day, just a bunch of Zooming. But then we officially just kind of, everyone reached a place where we thought, we don't know how long this is going to be. So everybody just take a break, which for me just becomes time to think more, you know. So I had a lot of time to really construct my thought process of the visuals and the design, particularly for the alt timeline.
And what did you want that to be? And I guess how much did that change at all from what you initially had, like pre-lockdown?
Well, it's interesting. See, season 1 and season 2 are like completely different shows visually.
Right.
You know, in season 1, we really had a very warm, lovely approach to Chateau Picard and Picard himself. And in this season, we began with the optimism of Starfleet, which I think is so true to the franchise and all of our characters from season 1. But we are at, Starfleet Academy in this beautiful space with all of the hopefulness of what Starfleet is, which is, we're about to go explore, to be looking for other life forms, other sentient life. Peaceful exploration is what Starfleet is. So this is the beauty of episode 1. And then we flip that with a snap of the fingers from Q. And what's the antithesis of that? So that for me as a designer is, what can I contribute visually with the knowledge and understanding of what Starfleet is and the characters we're bringing into this alternate timeline. But how different can that be? And how can we tell a very different story just immediately with the look and the colors and the silhouettes of things into a much darker place? If Starfleet is the peaceful exploration, the Confederation was about the eradication of all life forms that were not human. So it's a very different thing.
It's pretty dark, and they have to save humanity. So
yes.
Yeah, but you did there's a lot more blacks and grays.
Yeah, we kind of just extracted, all of the light and energy and positivity and aspiration of the world that we were in episode 1 just got sucked right out. So we really went, our signature term that we were all using was this high fascist style. If our socio-political commentary on the world is about alien and alien eradication, there really has to be a reverence and an understanding for how to portray that in a respectful way. So color just kind of went away. We were in grays and blacks, and it's very, very different from other Trek worlds. So I think it's immediate for the audience and the viewing team to say, we're not in Starfleet anymore.
Especially when you compare, because because in episode 2 is when they go, and that's also your submission. But yeah, you get to see the contrast immediately. And one of my favorite looks is 7 of 9's, like she's the president in the fall timeline, the black gray suit, and it kind of looks like she's like wearing a shirt, like there's a tie, but it's not. It's just part of the jacket. So what went into that look?
Well, interestingly for us, we returned to 7 this season in a very traditional sense. She's the Fenris Rangers, and we come with that style line from season 1. She's in go mode from the get-go. When we go into Wake Up World, she is unassimilated. So 7 is not 7 of 9. She is Annika Hansen, president of the Confederation. And we have this wonderful, tell all where she wakes up, and we reveal that there's no Borg tech, and it really does set the tone for a very different perception of a beloved character. So I think the intention was to, make her presidential, officious. She is like-minded to all these people who are eradicating alien life forms. So we wanted structure and style line and to have that very officious fascist kind of feeling. So there's a militarized style to her while it's still extremely fashion forward. We gave her that high collar line and that beautiful shoulder. But every detail of that was so carefully thought through, and I'm so glad it's well received. We tone on tone dyed each of the grays to these perfect colors. Textile artists, soup to nuts. The tailoring from Sharon McGonigal and her team. I mean, it is a stunning outfit. And I'll tell you a little story about even the belt is like, she wears this beautiful jacket. It's perfectly tailored to her. She comes out so grandly. And I knew, I have to have a belt. You have to have something to finish this. And it was one of those moments where you just have dead space as a designer and it kills you. And one day I just woke up from that like dream state of ding. Oh, and I scratched this little tiny pencil drawing, and I went to work and I met with Sharon McGonigal, our cutter fitter, and Dorothy Gulak-Arison, our specialty costumer. And I was like, here, I have this little scratch and this is what I want this belt to be. So all of the lines just perfectly kind of come into the middle of her body. And it's the pièce de résistance. I think it's the thing that makes that look.
Yeah, it's usually, sometimes it's usually like the little things, is maybe you don't even notice it.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's like-
very much.
Well, we have a lot of returning or old characters from like Next Generation this season with Board Queen.
Legacy characters.
Annie Wershing is the Board Queen. Obviously, Whoopi
Yes.
Goldberg back as Guinan, and obviously John Delancey as Q. So, what was your process in updating their looks, so to speak?
I think, we always approach things from story and character as designers, but here you have this body of work that precedes what you are jumping into, and years have gone by. So there's context and there's a launching pad and a character that precedes you. However, we're taking that new character into a completely different timeline, and sometimes 30 years later. So there's always that archaeological expedition where we start, like, we just turn into library geeks, where we go and just research all the imagery and the thought processes of the designers that were designing those characters when they were on TNG and at First Contact. And that becomes sort of your frame and your base. But then we take them where we want them to go, and what has changed for that character, and how does that represent visually, but also what's the connectivity. For instance, with Guinan, there's a lot of reference to her color palette from TNG, and of course the hat, to die for. Whoopi's a dream come true. She was down with the hat.
You gotta have the hat, like it's not
gotta have the hat. And then the Board Queen, I mean, this was a major creature for us. So there's a tremendous amount of overlap and collaboration with the prosthetic designers, Neville Page, and even your prop master, your actress. So you have this baseline of where you're coming from with the Board Queen, and we stayed true to, again, color becomes really a through line. So those coppers and browns and muddy tones that we used even in season 1 for Borg are all still there. But then we used a term called weaponized femininity for that character. So we just took there's a lot of Thierry Mugler inspiration in that look. There's a lot of really great like 80s and 90s designers, but then we creatured it up, and it's just, from head to toe, the lines of the creature look into that costume. It's, I think, a wonderful success.
Yeah, for sure. Lastly, last time we talked about Picard's like retired vineyard look, which I love because he has a lot of textiles and fabrics. And in the premiere, he has this like lovely cable knit sweater. I love all that. So how much fun is it to pick those, I guess, like human clothes?
It's just a wonderful opportunity to show a side to a character that we saw in uniform for years. Again, that thought process, and it's been mentioned here today, of who is this character, where do these clothes come from, I'm in a world where you can press a button and a replicator spits out whatever you want. So but I think Picard has such a reverence for the analog. It's still reading paper books in that, even in 2400. And I think we specifically chose knitwear and the art of knitting as a historical jumping off point for something that he would have a lot of respect and reverence for in his choices of making for his attire. So we kept that through line, and we did some 3D knitting this season. And so there's a beautiful sweater that he wears, again, with his field jacket, but you see it in the bookends of the season. So we carried that with us because I think it's very much a part of Picard.
Yeah, it's such a different look, but it still fits him. Like,
yes. Yeah, we still gave him a shoulder. He still looks great in it. But it's just a softer, more reverent, the history buff of Jean-Luc.
Yes. Well, Christine, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. See you back in a little bit. Laura Montgomery, Emmy nominee for What We Do in the Shadows. This is such a hilarious show. And as a costume designer, how fun is it to work on something that's rooted in period because they're vampires who are hundreds of years old, but also contemporary because they're living in our times?
I mean, you really hit the nail on the head, Joyce, with that summarization, because that is what makes it so fun. I think all costume designers love to work in period, and I love to do period. But with this show, because it is also contemporary, we have the freedom to not be hemmed into any period. So I like to say it's period, but it's all the periods. The conceit that started with the movie, What We Do in the Shadows, is that much like humans, vampires kind of get stuck in their best period, which for them is when they were human. So our cast, the backstories have them being human in different eras. So Nandor was human in the 1400s in Persia. Laszlo was a human in Victorian England. So we can kind of, ground them in that period and use those influences. But then because they've been alive for hundreds of years, it still makes sense that they would have picked up pieces along the way and had influences along the way. They've had many, many different lives. So we can throw in bits of contemporary clothing too.
For sure. Well, you also took over in season 3. So what was your approach in kind of just, advancing the characters' personal journeys? Like Guillermo, he's leaning more into the Van Helsing coat and like his background of it all. So yeah, what was your approach to each of the characters when you took over?
Yeah, I took over from Amanda Neal, who had done the movie in New Zealand and did the first 2 seasons of the show. So the characters were already quite established in, their backstories and who they were. She'd already built up these beautiful closets for them. And a lot of moving them forward came from what was written on the page, actually. Guillermo's storyline about becoming a Van Helsing, becoming the bodyguard, that came in through the scripts. And so then we realized, okay, we can bring a little more toughness to his character. He used to be very, 90s, 90s sweaters, 90s knits with the little round glasses. He still has the glasses, but we can introduce things like, and with him, it's really subtle differences, but it would be rolling up his shirt sleeves. That was a really big deal for him, getting to unbutton the first button of his collar, the introduction of a pair of leather gloves, which is kind of quite a badass look for him.
And in contrast to the others, like Colin, very neutral. I know he's been described as a beige. That's his mood board color. But this season, or in season 3, he turned 100. That was his birthday. So and I know you've said like that really helped you kind of like zero in on like you said, like the peak of like his style, right? So how did that inform you going forward in styling Colin?
It definitely did, because we didn't have much of a backstory for him. We didn't know how old he was. I think I always just assumed that he was contemporary. Like I didn't realize he was that old. And so from that, as you said, we was able to really home in on his era of when he was a young man, which would have been like the 40s, early 50s. And so I took a lot of influences of textures and fabrics and tailoring from those periods. So people like the Duke of Windsor in terms of the beautiful checks and some of that tailoring in his later years. Some of the like Cary Grant, some beautiful cuts of suits. So we built some suits for him, and subtle nods to it, because he still lives in the modern world. So he shouldn't look like he's plucked directly from the 40s and living in 2022. But that was able to really inform, his tastes and his tailoring. And so it was hugely helpful.
Sure. Yeah, it's just kind of refined, like very 40s are refined. Well, your submission was the Wellness Center, a hysterical episode, because Nandor joins a cult run by Jan, which is like an 80s aerobics class. But it's gotta be, I imagine it was fun for all of you guys, because it was like stylistically so different, because it was just bright colors instead of like the darkly lit rooms they're usually in. And then you got to design like 80s outfits too. So can you talk about that whole experience?
It was a ton of fun. And I had been waiting, because the season prior to that, Stephanie Robinson, one of the executive producers, her episode had been the Jackie Daytona episode, which was that kind of like, a perfect piece of television. But another episode where a character takes a journey and kind of explores a different world. And so for this season, it was this Wellness Center episode. And so we got to create this 80s cult, which had many iterations. Like it started as a yoga cult. It was kind of, and I think initially it was very location based. They wanted to shoot it outside. They were going to do more of like a camp, like summer camp feeling. But because we shoot in Toronto, from September to December, that was not possible because it's really cold. So they moved it inside, and eventually it kind of morphed into the aerobics cult. And so for that, it was a really, really tight collaboration with all of the departments. We built most of all of the athletic clothing. We built the aerobics clothing. And so we purchased fabric or custom dyed fabric to match what the production designer had done with the colors in the space, because there needed to be something off about it because it is a cult. So walking into it, it can't just feel like, oh, you're in an aerobic studio from the 80s. It's that, but there's also another layer of like, something is creepy about this place, that it just feels a little bit unsettling. So we had it very matchy, very cohesive with the color palette. They're almost wearing uniforms, but not. Watched a lot of the Jamie Lee Curtis movie Perfect. And then really tried to bring some authenticity to it as well. Like I had a lot of fun with Jan. Cree Summer is amazing. She was one of my idols growing up. And so I was able to pull influences from her of like, her tracksuit is based on a Gucci tracksuit. I'd seen a contemporary one. There's a lot of Cher in there, a lot of Debbie Allen. And then for the other vampires, it was trying to be 80s without being cliche or cheesy about it, and thinking that these are things that they would have kept from the 80s. So not doing like that sorority girls party version of like 80s night, but really authentically what people would have worn in the 80s. These vampires have not evolved since then. They got into it and they've just been wearing the same clothes that they have had since the 80s.
Vintage 80s workout clothes. Yeah. Well, I gotta also ask about the third episode, Gail, the iconic Twilight homage. The kickball game outside. I mean, but some of the costumes there were amazing. Like Nandor's like red velvet coat, I think it's like velvet, and Nadja's like peacock dress. Oh, so what went into those designs?
Those designs were quite influenced by the weather, actually, and knowing the considerations of shooting outside at night. Because they're vampires, they had always worn capes previously. And we've done some exterior scenes, but we hadn't really been outside all night long. So for this, my first thought was, I don't want to put Cave-In in a cape, because it's just really hard to stay warm in a cape. So the first thought was, with coats, we can put extra layers of, I think in his coat, there was a polar fleece lining actually, which, there's a lot of push and pull about the tailoring, but I just wanted to keep them warm. So for him, that was the first time that he'd had an outer garment with sleeves. So for the coat, that was a build of a beautiful red velvet that I found that already had a texture embossed into it. And then on top of that, I worked with the art department who made these beautiful motifs inspired by some paintings that we'd found from the period, from like 1400s Persian region. So we made the repeatable motifs and we custom embroidered them onto the coat. So we did one for him, one for his stunt double, of course, because there was a lot of flying in the kickball. And then for Nadia's peacock, there was a line in the script, which I'm not sure if it stayed in the final cut, but one of the werewolves makes some really hilarious joke about like, oh, it's these Pride and Prejudice mother bleepers. So I wanted to go really over the top with Nadia, with the decoration. And that costume is one that kind of carries us through because it has the peacock skirt, which is multiple pieces. It's the underskirt, a velvet overskirt. We hand pleated the silk for the trim. There's a detachable bustle. And then she has a bodice that she can wear with it inside, but because this was going to be an exterior costume, there is a jacket that's worn when it's outside. So it's a wool jacket that's dyed to match the peacock velvet.
Wow.
And so that's her warmer piece, and the bustle goes over that. So it comes from the script. And then
costume. Well, it looked amazing, and obviously a great episode, and a great season too. Well, Laura, it's great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. Welcome to our Meet the Experts costume designers panel. Today, we're joined by 6 Emmy contenders: Heidi Bivens from Euphoria, Sharon Long from The Great, Donna Zakowska from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Zaldy from RuPaul's Drag Race, Christine Bieselin Clark from Star Trek Picard, and Laura Montgomery from What We Do in the Shadows. Thank you all for being here. I always am curious about like how costume designers or any artisan begin their process. So how do you guys start when you start a new design or a new project? Do you sketch? Do you do like a mood board? Do you just go shopping for fabrics? Heidi, you want to start with you?
It definitely depends on the project. So if it's contemporary, I like doing a lot of people watching and definitely get ideas from real life characters. And yeah, I think, it's just so specific to the project. But with a show like Euphoria, I'm definitely using social media for inspiration, and I can like do a deep dive and go down that wormhole of social media. So that was a huge influence for me, just like what the kids are really wearing.
Mm-hmm. Where do you go to people watch?
Usually like out, like, well, actually when I was first doing research for Euphoria, I would go to high schools and like wait outside like to see what kids were really wearing. And when school would get out, in LA, I was surprised, for the most part, like style is like pretty homogenized for young people. And at the time, I really thought it had so much to do with, there was a lot of talk about bullying, that a lot of like teens were being bullied. I don't know if that's like changed since the pandemic because so many people were homeschooled, but yeah, I think, my hope is that the show has given people, it's just like this inspiration to express themselves through clothes in a different way than maybe they would have thought about before the show.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Donna, how about you?
Yeah, I think every show is different. I have a very different approach, but I think basically I always sort of begin with artistic sort of inspiration, whether it comes from paintings or palette or something even less significant. It might, I would sort of say I do look at a lot of botanicals and things in nature and, find palettes that are really inspiring to me. So I would say that I begin in a very abstract way. And then from there, sort of launch into probably, if it's a period, historical research, and then how those two things sort of connect together. I mean, you're always trying to find this special territory that is inspiring to you, that has a uniqueness to it, and sort of an excitement, And so I think finding that excitement for yourself is the beginning, and then figuring out, how you're going to transfer that to someone else, basically.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Zaldy, how about you? Especially just working with Ru for 30 years. How do you start?
Well, for Ru, it's pretty much the same. I mean, it's like it is always looking at everything that we've done and things that we'd like to do. One thing that I learned about from Ru, from the moment I met Ru, I met her at a nightclub, and I was like, Ru, you're wearing the same outfit that you were wearing last night. And Ru said to me, when it works, it always works. And I've always kept that in my design process for Ru, because like sometimes we'll make her a gown and Ru will say, I want this in 5 colors. I want this, which we never really do, but maybe down the line, like that silhouette might come back again and feel really familiar to her. But it's the same with everyone says. It's like, depending on what the project is, it's just a lot of research, from films to magazines to looking at what's happening on the streets, and then creating these amazing boards, like what's behind Sharon. That's like a room of just boards and boards of information that you just distill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sharon, talk about your boards and all your inspo behind you.
I'm not sure that they're supposed to be on show. Luckily, they're just they're not drawing.
We won't zoom in.
I have to say I agree with everybody that you approach different projects differently, and with the great, it was a lot of research, but also a lot of just trying to reinterpret the past. So going around art galleries, getting inspired in different ways, trying to sort of visualize the scripts really, which are quite sort of exciting, and people are not really doing period things. So I have to sort of extend my period knowledge to sort of encompass modern ideas and fabrics and things. And then I do end up drawing, but that's kind of much further down the process really, to explain to other people what I want them to do and how to help me make it all come.
Laura, how about you?
I agree with everyone. Each project is different. And I also just want to say how much a fan I am of all of your work. And just to pick up something that Heidi said about doing real life research and going to high schools, I think with Euphoria, you have really done something so amazing, which is you've created this feedback loop. Like, you looked at what people were doing, but then you have done your own thing. And now there's Euphoria High. Like, people are copying Euphoria. Like, you created your own look, which is so amazing. I like, kudos to you. But for research for what we do in the shadows, yes, it starts with a lot of historical research because it is a period show. So looking at all the periods, we do have contemporary characters as well. So it is a lot of people watching, thinking of people from my life, from my past. There's always that one person that you knew who can kind of set you on a path, or one thing that you hear about a bird or a plant that kind of points you to a color palette. And then for a show like Shadows, which now we're going into our 5th season, some of the research encompasses just watching previous seasons to figure out, like, okay, what have we done before? What's been really successful? Zaldy, like you said, what were the more successful things? We've had the opportunity to make some mistakes, like, oh, that shape didn't work quite as well, or that color, even though it's a rich navy, it just reads as black. So looking back and kind of improving all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Christine, how about you?
I think we all start from the same place, no matter what the project is, which is the story, and we go to the script. And I think as a designer, you're always looking to answer 2 primary questions, which is, what does this need to do? The functional necessities of whatever our character is doing and wearing. And then also, what does this need to say? So once we get those narratives going for ourselves, then I think for me, it's very much about research and finding line language. I do a lot of shape repetition. For instance, in episode 2, there's a lot of trapezoids, and you just come up with your language to express those 2 key things, which is, what are we needing to do and what are we needing to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What has been the most fun costume you have designed in your whole career? Sharon, let's start with you.
I think it actually is the great, and I think it's Nick's or Peter's baby shower costume was really fun.
That's a very, very chaotic look, the very Peter.
Yeah, a very chaotic look. I mean, it was based actually on operatic costumes, French operatic costumes of the period, but it was completely embraced by the actor, and it was great fun.
Zaldy, I saw you hang your head there.
It might be the worst question ever. It's just one of those. I mean, it's a great question, but it's always like, oh my god, what do I think? But I guess it would have to be for Katy Perry's last tour. I designed the opening and the closing, and it was this gold armor robotic outfit that I made for her, and she had to be able to dance and move and get all over on stage and all these things, but it just worked out exactly the way I wanted it to, which I often have that feeling when I'm done with the costume, like, oh my god, I could have improved it if I had one more day, but this one just sort of like came out exactly the way I wanted it to.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Donna, how about you?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have this answer, I think it's so specific. I think, and also the word fun, that's a tricky word to use in designing.
Whatever you want it to
You
mean.
know what I mean? But I think it's more the whole energy of it. I mean, I think Mrs. Maisel has been, incredibly enjoyable and fun for me. But I also love doing all the 18th century work that I had. So I think I'm not going to commit. I know it's hard, but I'm going to have to say it's more like the intensity of a specific project and the momentum of it that is the most fun for me. And I do think, Mrs. Maisel has come close to it for me. But I'm not going to choose one. I'm just not going to do it.
It's like picking your children, I guess, your favorite child. Right?
Sophie's choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Christine, can you pick?
Um, it is hard. This is a daunting question. But I have to say, if you're talking about joy, I'm always going to lean into sentiment, and I really do try to put little details of myself, the matriarchs of my family, into my work as my own little Easter eggs, just to bring myself happiness. And in the movie Spy, the delightful Melissa McCarthy goes undercover as the cat lady. And
Very
it's
familiar.
and the wigs are just over the top. It's out of control. But it was a hot pink tracksuit, but she had a picture of a cat on the shirt, and it's my cat.
The cat is famous.
Yes, very famous.
There
And
you
now
go.
there's little pop figures with my kitty cat Popo on it.
You just incorporate your cat into every project you do, just like
I
a
try.
Picard sweater.
I try. Just little, it's everywhere. So I think that's always a favorite of mine, and it brings me joy to see little elements of my life and things I love.
Mm-hmm. Heidi, how about you?
I agree. This is a real tough one. I think maybe easier to pick a character who I've had the most fun with, and that I think has to be Jules on Euphoria, Hunter Schafer's character. And just Hunter is so inspiring to me. I mean, she's become a muse of mine, and just to see her grow as a person and evolve as a human these past few years I've known her, she's just like has enriched my creative process in such a meaningful way that I definitely think she's been a favorite.
Mm-hmm. And
Jules.
Jules's look in season 2 has also evolved. It's like she's also kind of like finding her identity, and it's like a little bit more gender fluid than like season 1, her look, which was leaning more feminine, right?
Yeah, you're always looking for those ways to communicate, the inner psyche, right? As costume designers, wherever you can fit it in, even if it's Easter eggs that are just for us, for ourselves or for our crew or whoever. Yeah.
Laura, how about you?
I agree. It is a really hard question, and I'm glad to hear that other people try to inject themselves. I mean, I think as people behind the camera, I never want to be in front of the camera. But I just designed a jacket for a show that I'm on now, like a Japanese souvenir jacket, and there was a map of Japan on the back, and I spoke to the actors who were playing the character and put a lot of their family influence in. And even though geographically it does not work at all, I stuck in the town where my family is from in southern Japan. I was like, we're just gonna embroider that in on the bottom, just as a little, as a little personal thing. And in terms of costumes, for what we do in the shadows, Nadia is you're not supposed to play favorites, but she's the only woman. We get to have the most fun with her. And in the most recent season, which just started airing, they open a vampire nightclub. So I was able to live all of my teenage Zaldy. I think you got to live it in person. I just had to watch from Canada, what was going on with club kids. And so I got to kind of express all of my 90s club kid fantasies with their vampire nightclub this season.
Nice. You guys, Zaldy, you should collaborate on season 5 of Shadows. bring more.
I love vampires, so.
Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap, but it was great speaking with all of you. Congratulations again on amazing seasons and your nominations. And have a great day.
Great.
Thanks,
Bye.
Joyce.
Thank
Hope
you
to
so
see
much.
all
Thank
in
you.
September.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.